but all good. Paisans are paisans.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay. I think we are live. Check, check, check. Let's see. We're going live on, we're going live on 6 platforms today in honor of Mike here. So we're back on Loosh Tube, the tube that steals your loosh. And
douche tube, you mean?
Yeah. Lose tube. So many great names for that platform. But yeah, it's, a lot of people are on it. So we're gonna ride it out till they kick us out. We had a 2-week strike with them. For being naughty. So naughty, Bear, the things you say.
I enjoy hanging out as long as we can on Fluff Tube, just to be a pain in the ass for them.
Exactly. Well, we have Mike Donio on today. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Mike? Donio?
Donio, yeah.
Donio, okay. Okay, well, I'm going to hit record and fire this bad boy up, okay? So let's do it. And excited to get into all of this today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this will be a good one. Really admire what you've done, by the way.
How long do we have? Yeah, how long do we have today, Mike?
I mean, I'm pretty flexible. I just,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
so that's a good chunk of time. Not
6
really.
6 hours. Okay, good.
Yeah, sure.
I got to be off in 4 or 5, Mike.
Wait, you know what? I'm going to stop that. Sorry, we'll start over. You have to be off when, Bear?
No, I say 4 or 5 hours.
Okay, here we go.
You don't have anything else to do.
Oh my God. Okay. Here we go.
Keep screwing you up.
Yeah, because I don't want to have to go in and edit this in the audio. I just want to plug it. Here we go. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with the great Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the state of Jefferson here on the beautiful Smith River. The sun is shining. We've had a couple days of rain finally. And looks like winter's got a couple more weeks left, and then beautiful spring will be here, and we'll be busy out on the farm getting the Jiaogulan is already coming up. We're excited about it. We were hanging out with some friends over the weekend and had the kids pulling out some of the old Jiaogulan vines off the trellises and watching the little baby sprouts coming up. So spring is here, it's coming here, and it's an exciting time on the farm. And it's been a really fun ride so far, man. I can't believe we're already in March. And Bear, how's everything happening with you over there so far this week?
Good, just business as usual. You're right. The little rascals are popping their heads out of the ground already. We've had kind of a weird weather year with a lot of geoengineering. So we had our normal rainy season abruptly stopped at the same exact time. We noticed a lot of heavy spraying last year. A lot of people in the Southern Oregon area were all getting this mysterious illness, complete with some friends of ours that had an interesting call from somebody within the government that said, hey, how many people are sick in your little town? And, just kind of weird stuff. And when asked who the person was, she was very vague about her position in the government, but just somehow knew that she expected a lot of people to be sick, and nothing to do with all that other stuff that we always talk about. Anyway, interesting year.
And I guess
going on.
I guess there was government trucks or something that they had someone had seen spraying something in this little town.
Spraying. And then the mysterious lady called the local wood mill, lumber mill, and just asked a question. And they had all been at a gathering the night before in this one little Oregon town. And 200 people all got sick, and then that's when they got the phone call next day. So, somebody's looking at that town as a bunch of lab rats, I think. The good news is we're out here, we're surrounded by a lot of trees and water and rivers, and it's we're out of cell range. So, that's always a bonus. And I think we're buffered a lot from stuff, but they still are messing with the weather big time. So we're really out there getting ready for planting and doing a lot of good stuff, building a new little rock bridge over our new lake. Mike's out there finishing the lab right now, finished up our first greenhouse in zone 1. So that's all I have to report.
Yeah, and I did a little video which will come out tomorrow, doing some orgonite gifting with one of my kids on the coast, and we talk about how we can counter some of this stuff with great technology and real science. So we can maybe touch on that a little bit today. Speaking of science, we have Mike Donio on today to go. He's essentially I would call a whistleblower from the realm of biotech and with deep within the cult of scientism. He's come out of the closet per se, and is here to have a discussion with us about this. Mike Donio tells us why he did not comply with the Cootie Mandate, and that the quote unquote the science is not to be trusted. Biotech scientist Mike Donio has quite a story to tell. With advanced degrees in biochemistry and molecular biology from esteemed universities, including a concentration in Biotechnology Enterprise from Johns Hopkins, he'll share the inside scoop on the so-called scientific method. During Mike's 2 decades in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry, he witnessed firsthand how trusting the science is exactly what we shouldn't do, and what the scientific method really is. He's going to show us the unknown mechanism for most approved drugs, and improper models and artifacts of preparation, insider knowledge about the reproducibility, crisis, cancer, viruses, and fraudulent tests. This experience spans the spectrum of drug discovery, ranging from target identification through preclinical and IND-enabling studies. Mike can explain a little bit of what that means. His first job as a scientist was in the lab of a top infectious disease doctor doing HIV research. Following that, he went into the pharma industry, working several years at Schering-Plough, which was subsequently acquired by Merck. Next, he decided to mix things up and worked for a few years at Eurofins, a contract research organization. Finally, he spent the last 6 years at a biotech company in the immuno-oncology space, where he was most recently a senior scientist developing antibodies to treat cancer. Wow, that's a mouthful there. Antibodies. We'll touch on antibodies a little bit. The language itself is so comical.
Yeah.
Despite this extensive experience and accomplishments over the last 20 years, Mike, you look like you just got out of college, man. You look great. Man, you're doing something right. Mike was let go from his most recent
Italian.
Yeah, it's the Italiano genetics. He was let go from his most recent role at the biotech company for not complying with the Cootie Mandate due to his deeply held religious beliefs. Mike's aim is to encourage more scientists to speak out and for the people to become their own experts. Hear, hear. We couldn't agree more. And Mike's courage to speak the truth during these times of universal deceit bespeaks the revolution in consciousness now underway. Lando, this will be a treat to have Mike on board.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us, Mike. And I want to tell you right off that I really admire the path you've walked. And I believe that more people like you are sorely needed right now to turn things around. It's a great act of courage just to speak the truth these days, because you get the whole ridicule of the orc class, we'll say. And but you risked a lot and you also paid a price. So that takes a lot of courage. Absolutely. So thank you for that. We all, I think, should thank you. There's so much to talk about. I don't know where to start almost, but we're really going to go into science as we think of it. And I think of science as an individual thing myself. I don't believe there should be a special class of people that are considered the only ones capable of engaging in science. Science is, of course, just about knowledge, and knowledge is taking information and then applying that, having experience. And then when you have your own experience, then that becomes knowledge. I believe on the level of the soul that we are here to have our own experience, to gain knowledge through experience. And we've been deliberately taken out of the equation of the so-called scientific community, and also the scientific method, which you're much more versed at than myself, because you spent your life in biotech. I'm more of a clinician. I had to learn what I had to learn just to, get to do the hands-on work that I do. But the scientific method itself is all about somehow removing the experimenter from the experiment, which I don't buy that that's possible. And, I have a lot of ideas, and I don't expect you to agree with any or all of them. So we just want to hear, what you have to say. One last, sorry, I'm throwing the kitchen sink at you here today, but I think where we'll start is just how you came to the place where you decided not to comply with the Cootie shot. And, we'll talk a little bit in code right now so that the censors, maybe will survive a week without another strike. But one thing I'd really like to talk about also is the whole AIDS situation, since you were in the middle of that one. Now, I was in the middle of it, right in the beginning of the 80s when I first had my private practice, and I saw a lot of people with that. Now, from a clinical standpoint, I quickly came to the conclusion that what they were blaming the symptoms on, the AIDS symptoms, on a virus, that it just wasn't possible from what I was connecting in clinic. And also from that, I came to the conclusion that this thing we call virus has another backstory as well. And again, I don't expect you to agree with that. And I'm not sure where you stand with that, because we haven't spoken yet. A notable person who first came out was virologist Stefan Lanka, who was in the last movie we all did together in Terrain. And so he was one of those early heroes. And now there's a lot of other amazing doctors that, are coming to the same conclusion. So I'd like to compare notes, like age from the perspective of a biotech engineer researcher versus just kind of a blue collar clinician like myself. And so why don't we start out with, how did you get to the place where maybe you started looking at things a little askance in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, first, thank you both for having me on today. This is really great to be here with you, and for having the opportunity to speak out. I'm grateful. In terms of how I got to be, or on this path of where I am right now, I suppose I've always been someone who has asked questions, right? Even back when I was doing that HIV research, which was kind of one of my first jobs, and that was in more of an academic lab. So I never necessarily intended to be in industry. Actually, I would almost say that probably wasn't my goal back when I got started, because I didn't, even then I was very apprehensive about what was going on in industry, but I wound up falling into it eventually, regardless of that. But always was kind of skeptical about certain things. And, a good example of that is the HIV work that I did. So I worked with this top infectious disease doctor who studied at NIH under the infamous Dr. Fauci. And his dad was actually a world-renowned infectious disease doctor who was also had some relationship with Fauci. And nothing, both, really good people, nothing against them. But here I am working in this lab doing HIV research, young scientist, and there were just things that didn't add up to me. So I, of course, start searching and come up with I'm looking at all this stuff about why HIV doesn't cause or might not cause AIDS, and stumbling upon people like Peter Duesberg and all those sorts, and all this kinds of research. And so I've always been this kind of person that's questioned things, and throughout my whole career, was kind of a thorn in a lot of people's sides in terms of asking questions that probably you're not supposed to ask in meetings and things when data is being presented. And so along comes COVID, and I had some major not issues, I guess crises in my life in the past couple of years. I lost my dad 3 years ago to pancreatic cancer, and that really caused me to it was eye-opening in a lot of ways, but it also caused me to strengthen my faith a lot. And so going into COVID, I'm already kind of skeptical of things, really asking a lot of questions about what in the world is going on here. Very strong in my faith. And when it came time to decide what am I going to do about my job, and they said, you've got to take the cootie shot, as you say, or we're going to terminate you. I just, based on all the research that I had done myself and the questions that I had and my religious beliefs, I couldn't do it. And so, here I am. But I don't know. It was one of these things that I don't know. I have been told repeatedly by people that I thought were people, friends in the industry, by recruiters, that I should know better, right? Because I'm a scientist and I've spent all this time as a researcher. And so I should know better and just take the thing. And I said, yeah, except for I do know better. And that's why I didn't. And now I'm grateful to have had the support from my wife and from friends that kind of enabled me to take the big step of kind of, of losing my job and affect my career, because now, it's pretty much industry wide that you have to do this, and nobody will give you the time of day really if you don't. So I'm kind of out here on my own, and that's fine. I kind of feel in some ways that I've been freed from that work, because it is very kind of soul crushing work that's done in these biotechs. When you look at what they're doing, it seems nice. It's a nice package on the outside when you look at their fancy websites and everything, and they make a strong case that they're all about the patient and everything. But coming from the inside, that's certainly not in any way, shape, or form the case. And so it's in some ways it's been very liberating to be out of that and be able to speak the truth. And I guess I feel like I've been given a chance to do something with this, and I may not have asked for it. Nobody in the last couple of years has asked for this. Nobody wakes up and says, and wants this sort of thing. But I think it's how we respond to it and what we do when we're called to act like this is what really defines us. And so I just have felt very strongly that this was the correct path for me. And I've connected with a lot of incredible people like you guys, and it's been quite a journey, and I'm just grateful to have these opportunities like this to speak out.
Yeah, well, yeah, just amazing, because most people will not step up for so many reasons. So I'd like to talk a little bit, maybe we're getting ahead of the discussion a bit, but I'd like to talk about, maybe the future of science. Now, you obviously have some amazing skill sets and experience. And then within science itself, maybe we'd use this to segue into scientific method, what that really is. There are some major flaws from my perspective as far as the scientific method. So how do we translate your skill set, into, maybe revamping an entirely different foundation as far as, how this universe really works in the first place, and then applying those skills, technological skills and so forth, based on this new foundation. Do you see, that kind of transition possible? And by the way, I really believe people like you are going to be vindicated, not years down the road, but in the next few months, because you are on the right side of history as far as I'm concerned. And we're living in a time where things are unraveling very quickly. The timeline is greatly sped up, and the people that have been pushing all the phony narratives are already having egg on their face. So I think you're going to be better off than most. So how do we get through this transition so that we can take, maybe what is salvageable from, the old system, the technologies, and then base it on some real true foundations?
Yeah, because I think as you're saying, there's clearly a need to have science, but real science, not this scientism stuff that we've all come to see front and center the last 2 years. And the science, I guess, so to that end, I mean, the industry, it's obviously not a small challenge to go about rethinking this. The industry and the people at the top have quite a stranglehold on any ability to do research and how it's supposed to be done and all these different things. But I don't think that means that you can't think outside the box and you can't come up with a new way to do it in sort of a parallel system. If you're grounded on solid real scientific principles, and that gets to the scientific method. And I don't know, I mean, I could understand, and I'd like to hear more about what you're saying about different ideas on the scientific method, but I think we've got an issue right now where I don't know whether scientists are really even being taught the original scientific method or how to apply it properly, or I mean, it's almost like it's just completely been thrown out of the equation, so to speak, because it's just amazing what's going on in science and the quality. Well, I guess I should say the lack of quality of a lot of the research that's coming out. When you look at things, there's this major issue of reproducibility in science that I've brought up a couple times because I think I've read a lot about it, about the papers and the studies that have been done, and I've seen it myself firsthand. And it's something that's well known that there's these issues. But again, nobody sees that it's a problem, that data can't be reproduced, that many published research findings might be false. And I think a lot of that comes down to things like how the experimentation is designed in the first place, and how the scientific method is not used or not appropriately used, and what it's led to is just a tremendous amount of false data that becomes belief, right? And that's how we come to a situation where it's just trust the science, because there's really nothing behind it. And we have all of this literature, all of these studies out now that are underpinned on other studies, right? And if they're all questionable, then what do you have? You have a house of cards. I mean, we have to have some way to clearly define a method or something that we can use that can allow us to ask questions in a meaningful way and get answers that are interpretable by something other than just some arbitrary statistical analysis or are easily biased. I mean, there's so many of these crazy things that scientists do with their data, and just kind of going off on their own paths and how they design experiments. And I think a lot of that is bred by the system itself. And you just kind of fall into these traps and get sucked into it, and you wind up then perpetuating it in a way, in the same way that we wind up being dependent on trusting the science and trusting the experts, there's a lot of dependence that gets bred in there with a lot of this stuff just by the nature of the system. So the scientific method, it's supposed to be about kind of a way to go about a systematic way to question something and then ensure that you're being rigorous and designing an appropriate experiment. But the problem is, I don't think people are clear with what they're intending to do in the first place. So you're supposed to start with a hypothesis, right, which is supposed to be built on something that you've gone and that you've been researching, and then you're supposed to design an experiment that should enable you to make sense of whether that hypothesis might be valid or not. But I think what happens is the hypothesis is either thrown out altogether or it's not clearly defined, and then you go to the experiment and the experiment winds up, the methodology is all over the place because people just want to do what they want to do, or they're not well taught, and there's not enough standardization of things. So things just get kind of thrown all over the place. And then you also don't have nobody wants to discuss what assumptions you're taking. There's a tremendous amount of assumptions that are being taken when you're going into any kind of an experimental setting. And there's never any discussion about that. There's never anything there up front when you're designing the experiment. You go through the experiment, there's clearly impacts of any experimental procedure on the samples that you're doing. Nobody factors in anything of that nature into the interpretation of the data. There's well known that these procedures are going to have the potential to generate artifacts and things. Then you get to the data part, right? And even there, it's so arbitrary a lot of times what people do, but there should be rigorous, very specific data analysis that's applied so that you can draw clear conclusions. You shouldn't have to go through this stuff and struggle to figure out, well, how did they come up with this conclusion or not based on this data set? And I see that all the time when I look at papers. And then, what it comes down to is, was the hypothesis valid or not? And if it's not, then you go back to the drawing board, and there should be an extremely high bar to be able to say that something is valid. I mean, there should be weight behind that. But what happens now is you just reach a point, and because you've kind of not really even followed any process at all, you just say, okay, we're done. Who cares if it's valid or not? I got the intended outcome, and now we're just going to move on. And
it seems like, is it fair to say, Mike, that we're looking at a herd mentality that comes from a very young age, being brought into the scientism cult, as I like to say, through academia? It's all corporatism, right? So even in the foundational academic circles, that's corporatized, because that everything is corporatized now. Everything is owned by some form of corporation, even, all the governments, everything, all the academic circles. So what we're looking at here is literally, like, I like to refer to, like the Catholic Church was for hundreds of years in the Middle Ages. It is dogma. It is systemic from the ground up. And if you're not part of the herd, if you try to counter any of this, you are basically kicked out of the club. And did you see that in your own experience as someone who was questioning, which is the fundamental principle of science, supposed to be the fundamental principle of science, right? Question everything. And I know Einstein actually had, whether even some people don't even believe Einstein was even a person now, but Einstein had an interesting quote about science, and science is good unless you're doing it for somebody. In other words, as a job being paid by somebody, because then immediately the pursuit is essentially delegated towards working for somebody towards an end goal, for either that be a monetization or some sort of dogmatic, end result that they're trying to get. So, but just curious, in your own experience, did you have that where you started questioning and you saw immediately the dogmatic kind of in the club herd mentality come down upon you?
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely yes. The longer answer is it's all about funding when you get into, even in academia. I mean, and all you have to do is look at where these academic institutions and universities are getting their funding, and it becomes pretty apparent what's going on, because a lot of it is coming from pharma, right? Pharma funds a lot of things. And so it becomes hard to imagine that then you're doing independent research or your research, or you're going to be allowed to do whatever you want and not be strongly guided by that funding. And the same thing happens in industry, right? Because it's all about the company. And it's a little bit different when you're at a bigger company. So I was in big pharma for a little bit, and then most recently I was at a small biotech company. And when you're in a smaller company, especially a private one, it's all about the investors. But regardless, it's still the same kind of thing, that the funding is king. And there are a lot of people that you can ask them why they do things, and as crazy as it sounds, it's, well, we do what we do because we're trying to figure out what do the people with the money want, right? I've seen it, and I've seen people get basically in trouble for it, because then they wind up going off and doing things that don't make sense, or they make mistakes. And so it's incredibly led by, I guess, the money, and it totally distorts the ability to do anything really scientific. It becomes all about building value in these drugs that, I mean, when you really look at them, I don't know how that's possible in some cases, because there's so much that these companies put out about their drugs, because they're trying to build value, they're trying to promote their drugs, but it's a lot of hocus pocus. If you really allowed the scientific process to play out, it would, again, most of it would be shown to be invalid. But again, in these companies with that kind of pressure, you're right, it's exactly a herd mentality. Most people just kind of go along to get along in following those pursuits, and there's a clear reluctance to speaking out or going against it. Now, that's not to say, I don't want to come off like there's nobody out there, everybody in science, every scientist in every company is all in on it, and nobody is, or all in kind of lockstep with this stuff, and nobody questions anything. I've worked with a lot of good people, different backgrounds, that I've had a lot of great discussions with and questioning things. But the thing is, that's, in one-on-one on the side, when it comes down to it in a meeting or whatever, a lot of people won't raise their hand and push back, because they know there's going to be retribution. I mean, I can almost guarantee that my speaking up has probably cost me, well, now it's obviously cost me, but what, who cares? But when I was in there in the system, that it cost me opportunities. But at the end of the day, I'm like, what do I care about getting ahead in a system that's so badly broken and and moved so far away from actual science? I mean, what does that really mean?
So Mike, just to back up into the scientific method itself, the greatest assumption of all, I believe, is that we are able to set up a completely sterile environment for an experiment to take place where the experimenters have no influence. And now that brings us right to the real fundamentals of how do things work in the first place. And of course, if we look at what we consider science now, it's very young. Maybe a couple hundred years old or something.
Mhm.
And prior to that, there's great evidence that there were civilizations that have come and gone that were much in advance, and that a lot of what I would consider true science has been expunged because it's not good for vested interest, nor is it good if you want to keep people disempowered. So if we take science as we think of it today as one part of the equation, and another whole half of the equation's been left out, which is the fact that, we have a lot more to do with the creative process in the first place, which includes setting up an experimental situation. I know a lot of these concepts, I'd be laughed off the stage of any kind of biotech conference if I was a speaker or something, but there were levels of science, we talk about them all the time here. We'll just loosely call them alchemy, because it was a system of science that incorporates everything that we think of as science today. But then the other half was understanding that there's another whole element that we are not only, active in, but, it is us. So we have been pretending that we just have these material after effects, and we, focus solely on those rather than understanding, more the real science of waveform mechanics and things, and our participation in creating that as far as how that gets there in the first place. And of course, you can't create, some little bubble, because we're talking about a level of subtle electronics that is going to penetrate any, in vitro, test tube experiment or anything. There's nothing that can keep out that level of influence. So if you go into an experiment, you have a design, and I don't care who we are or how honest we are with ourselves, we are influencing that. So my whole comment here is, shouldn't we be spending, I know why that's not happening, but if we spent time really researching with all the resources that you had available to yourself with these biotech companies, and be able to research how that influence occurs and then bottle that, now we really have some things that are going to further us and, take us beyond those civilizations that came before us. And all these civilizations said the same exact thing. And we have a lot of remnants of them, that anybody can study. I did in all the alternative healing arts and so forth, where it explains, a great deal. It did it in different terminologies, but it's absolutely congruous of what we think of as Western science. So what's the possibility of that level of integration? Going back to my first, maybe a deeper level, my first question to you, or does the whole thing just need to crumble down and all these people go away somehow so that we can start anew?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't see how you can set up an experiment without having some, or not having any influence on it. You're already, especially the models that are used in science today, it's a system that's barely has anything to do with an intact human in the first place. They're so contrived and artificial. It's amazing when you see people try to translate it back into a human, even like the animal models that are used. It's amazing how they think that they can get anything from it. And so clearly there's definitely things acting upon that. And I agree, it'd be really amazing to get to the bottom of that. But in terms of building a new system, I don't know. Yeah, obviously looking at it from my perspective, being inside system and everything, part of me probably would love to see it crumble, but I don't know whether that has to happen. But I think we need a willingness to really question the foundational aspects of especially with respect to biology, because like you said, there's so much that we think we know today, but it's only been known for a short period of time. And there's certainly many things that have been expunged from the record. And really, biology in itself, biology and anything related to biology, bio means life. It's a Greek derivation, but that meaning of life really just is in terms of the flesh and the life, the existence of from birth to death. It doesn't really explain and allow exploration of anything beyond that. But there are other Greek words that are also translated to the English word life that go beyond that and kind of give a picture of, this life beyond just the flesh. And it's because it's obviously so much more than that. And science wants to break it into looking at us like we're machines, right? And always reduce it down to, like a single gene that causes something or whatever. But I mean, it's just absurd to think that could be looked at like that. And so clearly there has to be a lot of rethinking of and questioning of almost everything. But, I don't know whether you can tear everything down, because, then even though it would be tempting, but because we still kind of need to learn from what we've done and how we've gone wrong, right? I don't know if that.
I think I think it's a matter of building parallel systems
Mhm.
and incorporating the best of both worlds. That's what we're trying to do with our little humble project here. And, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And, it's tough working with the old institutionalized structure. And I absolutely agree with you. It's not some grand conspiracy where every single person on every level is in on it, and trying to screw everybody over. But one thing I'm pretty sure of is that there is a hierarchy, and that every level of that hierarchy, you only know what you know at your level, and then the person, the hierarchy level above you knows a little bit more, and so forth. And I think at the top of the whole pyramid, there are interests that exceed just pecuniary, and gets more into control and social engineering, we'll say. And I think it's not really a stretch to imagine that after what we've been witnessing these last 2 years. And in my career, I can scarcely believe what I've witnessed just over the last 40, 50 years. And going back to the AIDS epidemic and ferreting out the truth of what was behind that, and then seeing that it's, in my opinion, a very well orchestrated sequential program that was laid out even before then. When we were kids in high school, primary school, lined up, to get our little sugar cube, and then moving into all the steps leading up to the AIDS and now up to present time, you can see it's a very well thought out agenda. And at certain levels, people like yourself are dedicated and doing their best and really, got their heart in the right place. And then at the other levels, we're seeing the outcome of that right now on a larger global scale. So, back to the same situation. I don't think we're going to be working with those people at the top of the pyramid. I don't think they're redeemable. That's just my opinion. But I think we can start creating with people like yourself that now are all of a sudden maybe not working in that old domain. There's plenty of places where you can put your efforts along with people that have been doing other kind of work and really create the complete package that would solve all of our problems in the first place.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, and that's why I think we need to have more people that are willing to speak up and stand up. And even though it is difficult, and especially if you're still on the inside, you may not want to give up what you think you have there or face any kind of retribution. But I mean, if we're gonna build a parallel research science system or whatever, we need a good group of people. It's not going to be just one person or whatever. We need a lot of good minds in on it and really putting their heads together to come up with creative ideas to parse out what's the best of the old system, and then how do we build this new one. And yeah, you're right, it's definitely not going to be anything of the top level people in the industry, because they clearly don't care. And as you were saying, it's very, very, especially in the bigger companies, it's very, very siloed there. You really don't have any oversight or anything on what is actually going on at those higher levels. In a smaller company, you get a little bit more. I'm kind of surprised at some of the things I've seen at a smaller company. Just, I guess, by nature of it, it's a much flatter structure, and you're in meetings and things with senior level people and investors and things. So you kind of get exposed to things that you wouldn't otherwise at a bigger company. And so that's interesting. But those people, yeah, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with them, and they certainly wouldn't want to have anything to do with the parallel system. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, there is something to following the money as you bring up investors and things. And I think what we're seeing here for the last, decades is the slow fracturing and destruction of the debt system, the money system. And as the parallel system is, and from what I'm seeing, is starting to really flourish. One, people are waking up because they push too hard, because they are desperate it's a race trying to essentially keep the Ponzi going through globalism, versus those who are waking up to it and seeing through the black magic in the narrative. And it's exciting to me because I love races, first of all. Who doesn't love watching a good race? But I think decentralization is a prime aspect of what we're seeing to happen right now. And the decentralization of science especially is exciting to me, because people will be able to self-fund through new mechanisms. And as this awakening is happening, which we know it is, I mean, we look at the conversations that are happening all around us, and I'm in private groups with people discussing new ideas of science. Before the show, I asked you, Mike, what are you going to be doing now, right? Like, to make a living. And this entrepreneurial pursuit that can happen through decentralization, whether that be starting your own company or a private business organization or something, and start doing your own research as the awakening happens, and welcoming people in that might not even have the academic background, that have gone through all this mind control academia, but are just smart people that you can bring in, and you can start your own company or whatever, your association, organization, and start doing this yourselves. And that's what we're doing over here. And I think that's exciting, man. So have you looked into that at all, in terms of what you can be doing as, people start discovering what you're talking about, and maybe looking into alternative forms of research to see, well, one, you were just recently on a Health Freedom for Humanity podcast talking about the ridiculous in silico nature of what a virus is. But countering that with, new research on, say, pleomorphism, or ways to engage with the terrain in a way that would help people be healthier or whatnot. What is your plan moving forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, I am working on some ideas to try to start my own business, but on the side, I mean, I think we absolutely need to be moving toward finding a way to do research, because, like you're saying, there are a lot of these things, as we have these discussions about viruses and things, like what you were just talking about, the one I had on Health Freedom for Humanity. We need to be able to do research to explore what's going on in other explanations for disease, and what these things are doing, and how they're interacting with us. And obviously, the current system, there's no way you can do anything like that in that system, because you can't get money, and that's the biggest barrier. So I'd love to figure out a way to raise the money, because no investor, nobody that has the money in the old system is going to give you any money to do any of that kind of research. So the question is, and I think you make a great point with the decentralization of maybe there are some new creative ways to raise money to do this work. And it might not also have to be, I mean, it's the system that's set up right now, it's incredibly expensive to do research, but there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of aspects of that, new technologies and things that I don't know whether it's really worth it. A lot of this genomic stuff, right? It's so insanely expensive, but there's a lot of problems with it. So I mean, if I
always say it's just a Ponzi scheme to
oh,
enrich themselves through pseudoscience.
Oh yeah, and it's comical how you, if you were to talk to new young PhDs coming out of grad school or out of a postdoc or something, how they just parrot the use of these new systems, these new genomics and omics, proteomics and things. I mean, like they're pseudo marketers for the technology, because it's been so ingrained in them right now that this is the future. And it's just, yeah, it is quite a scheme, but I don't think you need any of that stuff. I think should be a way to set up a lab or things, you know, in much more simply to answer the kinds of questions we're talking about. But you still need some kind of funding, right? You can't do it for nothing, and you need to be able to have the infrastructure to build out the lab and have the people. So, you know, it would be great to try to figure out a way to do that, and that's kind of, you know, why I'm hoping to connect with, and I have connected with some good people through the Scientists for Health Freedom group that I've set up. And so, you know, maybe as this kind of continues along and more people are able to put their heads together and more people decide they want to stand up, you know, we'll be able to build a good group of people with strong experience that can put their heads together and put something together. I mean, you know, obviously that's not going to help me personally to recover the income I've lost, but it's a goal that I think is that we have to have. I mean, we need to get to some sort of a different system to ask these kinds of questions, because right now a lot of what we have is digging through old research, and I mean, that can be informative, certainly, and it's really interesting to look at what was done. Some of it's just absolutely baffling and mind-boggling, but a lot of the foundational work in some of these areas with respect to virology and other things, but that only takes you so far, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if we can find a way to do our own research and do it the right way, I think there's a tremendous amount of power in that. You know, if nothing else, then to be able to counter what's coming out of the other system. I mean, for me, this is bigger than just me. This is about the future, right? I have young kids. I want to hopefully have a system that they don't have to be stuck in the old system, right? They don't have to, that there's ways that the people will be able to defend against these things that got us into this situation that we're in now. And so that's a huge thing. You know, like I said, I'm trying to I have some ideas and things I'm working on to start my own business, but obviously, like, it's not easy, because I've had made all of these connections and things with all these people, hundreds of people in the industry, and it's like, all right, got to kind of throw those out because they don't want anything to do with me anymore.
Yeah.
So it has been a little bit challenging.
You know, Mike, the problem is we're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. And, you know, we've been led down this reductionist system where we keep going into further minutia, which takes great funding and technology to inspect on that level, facilities and things that, you know, gobble up millions of dollars in a blink of an eye. But in reality, if we just, you know, shift to, you know, invert our access of awareness and realize that all the answers are right under our nose already, and that like Mike was saying, in a decentralized fashion, if you have many practitioners of different types and people like yourself that are in modest laboratories, I'm building one out here for myself right now, you can prove out things very easily in a very economical way. And if you understand what really makes things tick in the first place, you don't have to go to that level of minutia. In fact, you find that when you do, you most often lose the forest through the trees. So again, I think that's part of the scam, is to bring us into this endless, inspection of, further minutia where we really never get anywhere. And then, you also have to differentiate between science and actual functional, like in the field of medicine, functional medicine is you learn how things work on that most authentic level. And there are many practitioners, I can tell you from firsthand experience, that are, getting excellent results in that way without, having the ability to have expensive technology, down to the DNA level and everything, because at that functional level, you understand how that DNA comes into place in the first place, rather than inverting your thinking and thinking you have to look at that firsthand when, the cause is right up here and you don't even have to, have any of that stuff in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, we don't really need all the stuff that we think we need to have. We don't have to have billion-dollar facilities. All that stuff would be great someday down the road to work both ends if we had an honest system and, a non-predatory kind of arrangement where others weren't trying to control others. But for right now, we can get way further down the road just on our own through this decentralization, taking people with your skill levels, people like myself that, are just working kind of on the front lines in different ways and put our heads together. So what do you think? Are there more people like yourself that are ready to just kind of have a major shift in their perspective and go to work in a different way?
I think slowly but surely, and I think the more people that speak out, maybe some of the people will kind of crawl out from under their hiding place. I think even more will come out and be more confident about not having to leave behind whatever, there's so many people that, it's my life's work, or, they're just so stuck in the system, but yet they question things. And I don't know, I think the more people that we can get to come out, that'll just breed even more people coming out. It's always toughest for the first people that come out, but I think as more and more, it just kind of pulls more people out. And I think, I'm hopeful that we're going to wind up with a lot of good people. Like I said, I've already connected with a number of good scientists and doctors, and that I think are very willing to explore these things. So I think only more will come out, and I think we really need more to come out.
And there's such a rich in terms of biology, such a rich history of what Bear was mentioning, of people like Enderlein, Gaston Naessens, these true scientists that were doing things that we can go back to and do further study on. Like the Biggleston brothers are a great example. There are people out there doing the real science, and it's really with basic observation and diagnostics that aren't so complicated. And as I said earlier, in silico, which is where they're driving all the technology and all the science to, is inside the computer and away from the natural observations, right? Using something like dark field microscopy and things like that. So I think there's a great tradition that we can look back to as well, even like Tesla, Walter Russell, all these people we talk about. and embrace that what's already been done and bringing it back to the forefront, right, in a decentralized way. And I think there's going to be a lot of really fun funding mechanisms too, Mike, that I could talk to you offline, where we've seen, crowdfunding things, and I think the true wealth is going to be coming from the consciousness explosion and the human aspect of people coming over more than the money. I truly agree. And you are so right. You are a pioneer here because you had the guts to step out and inspire others to do so. And we so appreciate that. In terms of diagnostics and things, and actually we need a philosophical new ground floor too, right? To understand what the observer is and what natural sciences really are. Have you been inspired recently as you've been stepping out? I know you've been involved in some private Telegram groups and stuff, seeing new ways of thinking about what the scientific method really can be and what it should be in terms of who the observer is and what the philosophical kind of, infrastructure or base layer of what science really needs to be? It's kind of a loaded question there, but
yeah, no, I mean, I'll be the first to admit that there's a lot that I don't know. And I've learned a great deal myself over the last couple of years being a part of these kinds of groups like you're talking about. I mean, I think there's a lot of great ideas that are being discussed. And, you don't have to be a so-called expert either. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of different people, coming from different backgrounds that have great ideas. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good stuff out there now within these communities where people are, when they're able to think for themselves and do the work and not be told, well, who cares about what you think, is you're not an expert, then you can actually come up with some really, really intriguing ideas. And yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot. I can't recall a lot of specifics off my head, off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of great discussions, and I think a lot of it comes down to really reevaluating what we think we know already, because again, we're told to trust so much without being able to go back and say, well, why? Show us the proof. Show us that it. Show it. And so I think it really comes down to being able to go back and a lot of what people have asked about and talked about, and I think it's great, is really going back and looking at the foundational research on a lot of these topics, and seeing what the early people were doing, like what you're talking about, and building from there, because it's a great way to learn where we got here, where we got these things from, but also be able to refute what is coming out, because everybody wants to just say, well, you're not an expert, or you're not this, or you're nuts, but if you look at this stuff and you go back and you look at how we came to these beliefs, I'll say beliefs, claims, whatever, it can be really enlightening. It's there if you're willing to go look, right? So yeah, there's a lot of really good ideas coming out, and I for one have learned a lot, and I think there'll be a lot, people keep putting their heads together and keep building these communities. I think there's a lot of creative energy that's ready to spill out and come up with some great ideas.
Yeah, and it's about building on, just as you said, Mike said, building upon what's been here before. Ironically, we're talking today about, well, we don't want to just dismiss all the things that have come out of the last couple 100 years of what we think of as Western science. But then at the same time, Western science has thrown out thousands of years of evidence and knowledge that came before. And, the greatest technology in the world that we have to, keep reminding ourselves is the human body. I had some great teachers along the way. One was an osteopath from France, and he not only took us step by step over a number of years so that we could develop that fine tuning in our own hands to discern what even a surgeon wouldn't be able to see with their own eyes, but also laid down the foundation as far as why our biological technology is superior to anything that anybody could create in the first place on the technological level. And all those technologies in the first place are really crude devices that are just mimicking what's already within us. So I believe science really should take the rightful place of being a method of self-observation, and through that, understanding ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves. And, again, going back to our initial discussion, science has become this taking us out of the equation, making believe like we aren't in the room in the first place. And with that, of course, we abrogate our true potential to these technologies. So we've got to somehow invert that back to ourselves. And, any good doctor out there in alternative medicine will tell you that unless a patient is willing to engage and, maybe have a little hand holding, but eventually take responsibility and become their own doctor, that they're only going to get so far. So anyway, more of a comment than anything, but, as far as, what people like you bring to the table now, I think we can really get somewhere, and we are all finding each other. So to me, it's very encouraging what's happening right now.
Yeah, Mike, and working in biotech, in these last few years, where was your observations there in terms of where that industry is going? It seems like it's kind of spinning out of control in some respects. The language, when you try to read these papers, which, I've tried to do, it just seems like the vernacular has gotten so complex, especially with all the genomic stuff you were mentioning. Is that intentional? I mean, it seems like it's gotten to the point where it's like gibberish. It's gotten so ridiculous. I mean, what's your opinion on that, and where did you see this all going?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has kind of spun a little bit out of control, especially with the events of the last couple of years. I mean, it was already going into some weird places with all of the like genomic stuff and everything. I mean, there's so many little companies, startups that have popped up in the last couple of years, especially now, that have been all about taking advantage of that technology. And, again, all more and more of this in silico stuff. So you're getting less and farther away from actual science and observational research. But yeah, I think you make a great point that one of the biggest barriers is terminology, right? And certainly with people that I talk to, they start to try to read up on stuff and they run into these terms and they go, okay, I don't know what the heck that means. So then let me go ask an expert, right? And then you've given up that knowledge and that power, and you've gone over to your favorite expert, and then you're just leaning on them to tell you what to say. And so I don't know whether it was, intentional, but it certainly has made for a nice barrier to really be able to get into the weeds and make sense for somebody who's not already there of what's going on. So whether or not it's intentional or not, it's a nice system, because it's almost like it's its own language of science that you kind of have to deal with if you're going down the route of trying to do your own research. Because you pick up any paper, you're going to come across words that are going to seem like gibberish or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I end up going down the Wikipedia trail where literally I end up having 30 tabs open because I have to go research what this word is. And then there's words in that. And I go, what's that word? And then it goes to that word. Before I know it, I'm so far away from the original article. And yeah, I mean, obviously you know, as in terms of intention, I think it's an after effect, or it's a result of the entire systemic, you know, ridiculousness that we're looking at now from academia on up to this corporatization of science, where everyone's so specialized, right? Everyone so has their own very specific specialization, that they have to create their own vernacular. And then it does make it extremely hard to get through the weeds. So yeah, I've been there. And then of course, Wikipedia, how controlled is that? But you're right, the experts thing, it's tough, man. So is there a way to simplify this? Do you see that happening? Or as Bear said, I mean, we keep kind of going back to this. Where does this house of cards go? I mean, does it need to collapse, or how do we figure this all out? Because it does seem so immense.
Yeah. It's obviously it's overwhelming enough for people that are in it. I mean, I can say there's a lot of stuff that even I'm like, I pick up papers and stuff, and you're like, what the heck does this say? So I can't even imagine for people that are on the outside how crazy it can seem when you're going through it. And I think one thing that we could think about is, and that I've been thinking about, is how to make it more approachable so that you don't have to sit there and have 50 tabs open searching for terms, right? Because wouldn't that make it a lot easier if there was some kind of a resource that either, well, I guess first and foremost, to provide a bunch of terminology and build a foundation of that terminology, so you have a starting place, and then from there build up into, well, how in the world do I go about navigating, reading a scientific paper, looking at scientific data? How do I make heads or tails of this? Once I kind of get some of that vernacular under my wings a little bit, and I feel a little bit more comfortable wading out into the deeper waters of the science, so to speak. And that's actually one of the ideas I've been thinking about, is building this kind of a resource and putting together all of this terminology, and not just from a level of what does it mean, but where do these terms come from too. I really like looking into where a lot of these terms were derived from, because you can see how the meanings were changed through the years from where the original term was derived from, the original Greek or Latin. I mean, science is derived from the Latin scientia, which means knowledge. But there's other crazy things like, I don't know if you're aware of pharmacology and pharmacy, where that was derived from the Greek, the pharmakeia, right, which means sorcery and things. So
kind of, yeah.
Interesting to dig into the terminology on a different level, but it can also be informative when you're going and looking this stuff to see, because what I find is once you get past that barrier, there's a lot in science that's got big words, but that really is more simple than you realize at first. So if you can get past that barrier, I think we can unlock, for anybody that wants to do it, can unlock a lot more ability to do their own research. But it is quite a formidable barrier getting around some of the terminology. And so, that's why I was thinking of a way to make it more approachable, and help people to do that research themselves, because we've got to take that power back. We can't just look to other people to do this stuff for us. We have to be able to explore this knowledge so that we can know ourselves better.
I strongly believe it's all been encoded by design. I mean, other institutions look at, when you look at like the tax code, why does it have to be a code? And
they didn't
why
hide
does
that
it have to be? Why does it have to be 1 million pages long? And then, like you say, you look at the roots of some of these words that are just commonly used, and they have some sinister connotations. So why is that? And of course, is to take the average person out of the equation to make them believe that it's way over their head. You have to see a specialist. And so, let's go back just a little bit. Now, we will have to speak in code on this one. There's the other side of what's been going on here, where now I've witnessed ample evidence for many, many years that a lot of medical procedures are deliberately not for our own good, and culminating into present time where this seems to be the culmination of a very long-term devious plot to get rid of folks. So how many folks in the biotech industry are wrapping their minds around that, or is it just too much truth to bear?
Yeah, I think it is a lot of truth to bear. I mean, even as some of these things got rolled out with respect to the requirements, there were times when it got so crazy even that people would say, wow, I can't believe that it's gotten to this point, or this almost seems like too much. But then, it's like a fleeting thought, because then they quickly revert and go, but I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna still play along. So it's amazing, because it's not that people don't see what's going on to some level, but the propensity to just almost flip a switch and be like, yeah, but I'm just not going to worry about it. And, it's kind of mind boggling.
It is.
Well, and
a lot of denial, but for good reason.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, it's interesting in your bio that you opted out because of your faith. And this brings in this notion of spirit, soul, which is obviously lacking from the Cartesian model of reductionist materialism, which is the ground, of the scientific revolution. Interesting quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. And the interesting thing here is you, as someone who is a man of faith, how do we merge those two? And is that maybe one of the most important missing things in what we can really use to help save science?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's clearly been an intentional attempt, at least, to cut out the faith part and to almost replace that with the science, right? I mean, it's become almost a religion unto itself. But at the end of the day, what you find is a lot of this stuff really has strong foundations in faith, in the, when you look at the Bible, for example, because that's where I go, and it's hard to not, it's hard to ignore that when you're thinking about these things, but it's been clearly cut out of the thinking of modern mainstream science, probably intentionally, most likely. But that doesn't mean that it's not something that should be an important part of the equation either, because it's who we are. Unless you, I mean, at least from my perspective, I don't think we're machines. I don't think we're just here to just be some kind of machines. I'm not, I might be sitting here in like some kind of a flesh suit, but that's not really who we all are. I think we're so much more than that. We all have so much more power than we realize. And if we're not taking that into account when we're doing science and thinking about this stuff, I think we're missing a lot. Yeah.
I would argue that spiritual, as we think of it, is the real science, and instead we're looking at the shadows on Plato's cave,
Yeah, that's a great.
We're looking at after effects. So again, it always boils down to the grand inversion. We're again looking at things directly from the wrong perspective. And going back to what used to be called alchemy again, it was all about a spiritual science.
Mm-hmm.
And then learning how to create the after effects by understanding those mechanisms, and then being greatly empowered by that, and realizing that you are not a victim of those after effects. You're actually the cause And also there's a much bigger cause outside of yourself that we are privileged to, let's just say, participate as an individualization of. That's just my perspective.
Yeah. The system has been pretty well built around trying to narrow the focus into anything but the spiritual and keep us looking at the cave, right? As you said, that's a great example.
Yeah, and you see that there's related to spirit is morality, and that seems to be a missing piece of the pie in a lot of the scientism these days.
Oh yeah.
The great book you mentioned, and there's a lot of science within the great book. In fact, Bear, I was messaging Marty Leeds last night. This wonderful book by Marty Leeds, Lord Jesus Christ, which is all about math ingrained as the principal universal language of spirit.
Wow.
And so what we're talking about here with the Bible and with the traditional mystery schools and all that is essentially science. And that's exciting. I think that people are like Marty are out there that are bringing that back to the fold, that we can all witness this great revolution of consciousness as we start to understand what real science is. Huh, Bear?
That's an amazing book, by the way. And I'd encourage anybody to tune in to Marty's Sunday morning, I don't want to say services, but he'll go into different topics. Last week, it was this last Sunday was great. You know, he got into the whole understanding of Noah and what was really going on there. So I enjoy those immensely. I can't wait for him every Sunday now. So, but yeah, you go into, biblical studies from a whole different mindset, and you realize, wow, there's a lot going on that maybe my priest, that taught me, in my upbringing weren't quite glocking themselves, let alone, conveying that truth to us.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, when you, in your experience working in these firms, did you run across many people that, were religious or believed in God, or was it mostly atheists?
There's definitely a lot of atheists, but there's actually a lot of people, and this was something that really surprised me, because there are a lot of people who are seemingly very faith-based across a lot of different religious backgrounds and denominations and things, but and some of them, quite traditional and orthodox people that I've worked with that I would have almost, I don't know, I don't want to say assumed, but I mean, it was just kind of surprising to see that their beliefs didn't factor in more to deciding how to approach the mandates that we were under. But you're right. It's not that there's definitely atheists, but it's definitely not all, which is kind of surprising. And the fact, and again, I was really surprised at kind of how to see the reactions and how different people with different backgrounds kind of approached things the last few years. The last company I was at was a very small company, but even then we had quite a bit of diversity in terms of religious background, but I was the only one who stood up and did anything about it despite that. So I don't know what that says about their beliefs or the strength of their beliefs or anything like that, but I guess an interesting observation. Maybe you want to talk about.
That is interesting. I just want to ask you, when I was a recovering Catholic when I, went into my medical studies, and just still kind of creating separation with my past in that respect. And then when I got into just even pre-med, you're studying Guyton's physiology, it actually brought me back to spirit, because it was just, with those studies, it was apparent to me that there's definitely an intelligence behind things. And I was just marveling at all these things that I was learning about. But then curiously, a lot of people that delve into the sciences go the opposite way and embrace atheism. It's just funny how you can have such an opposite reaction with the same exact studies. Sorry, Mike, I kind of jumped in front of you there too.
The other Mike?
Mike, you were about to say something, I think. Sorry about that.
Oh, which I was like, which Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I this has been a great conversation. And I think Max Planck, who's the famous scientist, he was the one that said scientism will never be able to uncover the greatest mysteries because as the observer, we're part of that mystery. Mm-hmm. So, we're involved in a paradox here. And it really, I think, this is why I love philosophy, because I think we need to really get better philosophical infrastructure and base layer for science to really flourish. And we are indebted right now to these great classicists that were able to uncover this back in the Greek times and things. And just going back to all these this heritage of philosophy, I think is really exciting to see, because a lot of quote unquote scientists, I think, are starting to see the light in terms of the spirit aspect, the soul and all that. Rudolf Steiner, we talk about a lot. He's coming up a lot now in conversations. Even we're starting to see more Walter Russell discussion popping up. So I think we're in exciting times for science. I really do. And we're here to help you and assist you, Mike, in any way we can, in our own humble way. To see you go to the next step towards creating your own entrepreneurial pursuits and exploring where science can really go, because the time is now, and it's exciting to see all of this unfolding in front of us right now. And we hope that you are inspired on the daily, people listening here, to not be considered yourself not an expert, right? The experts are not the experts. That's for sure. So, Mike, we're coming up here on an hour and a half. Any final things that you'd like to bring up to our audience, what you've been up to or what you're planning to do? Also, this organization you've created, embracing scientists as they come out, maybe give us a little insight into what you're doing with that.
Yeah. So, shortly after I was let go from my job, I had a strong inclination to connect with other scientists. And, I had a question was, there must be other scientists, but are there really, and where are they? And can I connect with them? And it was, there was kind of like an absence of communities specifically to connecting scientists. So I said, all right, I'll just throw something up and see. And the idea was, it's not for me at all. It's kind of like planting a seed, if you will, and hoping that it would and that's kind of what's happened. It's kind of organically grown, and we've actually built we've got a lot of really great people now, so it's called Scientists for Health Freedom. And the main things are, again, to connect scientists who are willing to speak out, encourage more to speak out, connect them, have a community where they can interact, discuss ideas, but also to support anybody that's speaking out. So to highlight anybody that's speaking out, we're going to make sure that if they're doing interviews or things, that we're highlighting them. I even want to start having discussions with scientists to give them an extra, an extra vehicle to speak out. I really want to strongly support anybody that's willing to speak out, and to know that they'll be supported, that their voice will be heard in one way, shape, or form. So that's what it's really all about. It's just because I know how hard it is for people to step out and to get the courage sometime to speak out. But I really believe that there's more people, more and more, that are asking questions, that are seeing things change, and that might be willing to actually to speak out. And so, I hope they'll join us. Again, it's, I'm just part of the community, and I just hope we can keep growing. We already got, like I said, a great group of people, and the more that come and speak out, the better. The more we can grow and come up with ideas for, hopefully a parallel research system, right? So that's kind of what it's really all about. And it started on Telegram, with just a channel and a chat, and I've kind of started little by little to grow it beyond there into other social media platforms and things, just because you never know where scientists are. Kind of a fickle bunch, where you're going to find scientists and be able to connect with them. And so I just thought, well, maybe spread out a little bit and see if you can connect with more people. And so as a pure scientist of my nature, I'm just kind of experimenting with it, right? And seeing how it will grow on its own. And it's been great. But that's the thing with that. I really hope more people will be motivated and encouraged to speak out.
Well, thank you for speaking out yourself. Again, you're a hero as far as I'm concerned. And thanks for being with us today. And let's stay connected. And who knows, maybe we can have some joint ventures in the near future.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. I really, really appreciate being here with you guys today. And yeah, I mean, everything you guys are doing is awesome. And I would be happy to stay connected. That would be great.
Hey, Mike, what is the actual Telegram group?
Oh, so the channel is it's Scientists for Health Freedom, and then the chat is S4HF.
Wonderful. And do you have a website or anything?
Not really. I have
Okay.
like a Substack blog that I started up, but not really a formal website.
Okay. Well, I'll put that in the show notes below so people can interact there and support you. Do you have any kind of fundraising apparatus set up as of yet?
No, I haven't. I don't know.
Let's get that going. Yeah, you'd be surprised, man. People want to support this kind of stuff with the energy of money. Money's just energy. And
True, yeah.
It's not we were saying in the chat, money's the root of all evil because we're talking about big pharma controlling everything. But that's because we've given them that power in many respects, right? So let's take it back. Let's support Mike and these scientists who, whistleblowers are the most attacked people coming from the system. We've seen it in all areas, from tech to doctors to scientists. It can be very scary. So people want to support you with their energy via money. So I'd highly recommend setting up some GoFundMe or some kind of cool, even crypto wallets, Bitcoin, Monero, Court. Love to get you up in Cordal and have a group set up there. We have fully decentralized chats going on there in groups where you cannot be taken down. You can put a website up now. It's completely free and encrypted and totally decentralized, cannot be censored at all, ever.
Wow.
So
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
And yeah. And also, Mike, we can talk more behind the scenes, but we're in the midst of establishing foundations. There are many people that want to help in a big way, and it will, go well beyond GoFundMe and all in the system things that take all your money in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we're actively in that process, and a lot of people really want to join forces, but they don't know what so they want to support people like you. So let's talk about that maybe in a private conversation.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful, guys. Well, thanks again, Mike, for joining us today. If you guys resonated with this conversation, please give us a thumbs up, a like, a share with your friends or family. That really helps us get this information out to more people and help the Great Awakening expand. If you're new to us, you can find out more about us at alfavedic.com. That's ALFAVEDIC.com. We do have a Telegram that's very vital and has a lot of action going on there. It's a great group. That's at t.me/Alfa Vedic. We are on Discord at alfavedic.com/Discord, and we are making moves to have all of this on our own platform very soon here, which is very exciting as we move more and more decentralized. So Thanks again, Mike, for joining us today. Please go support him, guys. And we'll see you on Monday with the great David Icke. Will be streaming with us on Be Sovereign. That should be a really, really fun one. And then we'll be going deep into the Mandela effect on the following Thursday and trip out on time and trip out on all the good stuff that we love to talk about. So really fun. And thanks again, Mike. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Remember, get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go for a hike, plant something. Mother Nature is our best teacher. We love her. She loves us. So let's engage every day with her. Love you guys. And we'll see you on Monday. Monday special time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Be Sovereign. I'll probably be on YouTube and such too, but please join us on Be Sovereign, the new platform, Sayergy's new platform, with the great David Icke. Thanks, guys. See you next time.